Good morning. So how early is it feeling right now? Like super early or just, doing okay? Okay. All right, fabulous. I want to start today with 3 questions. Question number 1, by show of hands, how many of you have ever been to IKEA? Oh yeah, all right, this I expect. All right, question number 2. Did I already say question number 2? Okay, again, it's early. All right, question number 2, by show of hands, how many of those of you who have been to IKEA have left with something you did not plan to buy? Yes, all right. Now, thank you, you can put your hands down. You are not alone. There is a researcher out of the University of London that says that 60% of purchases at IKEA are unplanned. Which leads us to the 3rd question, which is what I want to talk about today, which is why? Because imagine that. Imagine in your businesses, if you could get people 2/3 of the time to walk out with something that they didn't start knowing that they wanted. Now, we can think about this in the terms of buying things from your companies, but it also has to do with how do we build the buy-in that you need for a lot of the big changes that are facing your industry right now. Now, what do I mean by buy-in? Define my terms real quick. What I mean by buy-in is believing in something enough to actually act on it. So that when you're in the middle of IKEA and you're like, look at that fork, I need it, that you do it. But I also mean it from the perspective of when you're presenting someone with a new thing, right? And there's something that you need them to do. There's this big gap that they have to cross in order to do that. And they're on one side saying, what is it that you want from me? And you're on the other side going, do this. And they are like, oh no, not doing that. It takes a huge leap of faith to do that. And when you just tell people, hey, come on over to this other side, a lot of times that telling people, this change is good for you, it's going to make sense, it's going to make you more money, just telling them that is not enough to get them to cross. So we need to figure out why this happens and how we can do something different with it, right? Because you've got these changes coming up. Or you've done them. Changes to your compensation plans, changes to your technology platforms, changes to affiliate programs or adding affiliate programs into your company. These are, for some of your people, not only in the home office but out in the field, really big changes, right? And the lack of buy-in for these changes can bring down not just the change, but it could bring down companies. I know you've heard horror stories of that, when something big change had to happen and it just didn't stick. So we need to figure out together how it is that we build a way for people to cross so that there isn't a leap of faith that they have to take. It's something where they feel comfortable and confident to go from wherever they are, mentally and emotionally, to where you want and need them to be. But not just once, to stay there with you. Because when we're talking about building buy-in for change, I'm not just talking about doing it once or twice or whatever. I'm talking about how do we find the strongest, simplest, stickiest ways to create these changes, to get this buy-in that you need, not only internally, but externally, from your distributors, from your clients, and your customers. Because this is the standard I want us to bring us to. I want to raise those stakes. I want to say, okay, we're not just trying to build buy-in. We're trying to build strong, simple, sticky buy-in that's going to last for a while. Now, to do that, we need 2 things. Number 1, we need understanding. People have to understand what the big change is. And then the big trick, how do we get them to agree with it? Now, it may seem like, we don't have to worry about the understanding bit, but I am going to argue that a lot of times we miss on the explanation part in the first place. But the agreement part can be really difficult. But I'm going to tell you the answer right now. What we're going to learn how to do together today is how do we build a story about that change that your folks haven't heard before, but already believe, how to build a case for change that they haven't heard before, but already agree with. Now, to do that, and how I figured this part out, a lot of it comes from where I've spent my life, which is kind of between two worlds all the time. I was like a theater kid. Yes. Well, I was anybody's in West Side Story in 7th grade. It was fabulous. But I was also the manager of the varsity boys baseball team. In college, I studied business and American studies. In grad school, I studied organizational behavior and crisis communications and nonprofits. So it's always been this two-part world: nonprofit, for-profit, marketing, sales, internal, external. But the thing that I learned, where I learned the most about how to make change happen, not just at the market level, but at the individual level, was in the 13 years that I moonlighted as a weight loss coach with WW, formerly Weight Watchers. Yep, that's me, 50 pounds in 25 years ago. But even though that's not a direct selling model, it's actually really similar certain ways. Because I was the only contact between our members and the company. The success of the company was dependent on me and other leaders like me to get people to come into the meeting room, stay in the meeting room, and be successful in the meeting room. And 3,000 presentations later, what I know deep in my soul is that if something doesn't work in here, in the head of an individual, it will never work at an organizational level. It will never work at a market level. And that biggest lesson can be summed up in one statement: that every decision that any of us makes has a story behind it. A story that we tell ourselves about why that decision makes sense. Now, I am obsessed with these stories. I call them red threads. I spent 25 years discovering and researching them. I spent 5 years testing a methodology for how to take ideas and break them into the components that create these kinds of stories. But these stories may not be the kind of stories that you think about. This is not necessarily like, once upon a time, there was a person named Tamsen, and she went to IKEA looking for a fnork, right? We're talking about stories that happen pre-consciously. The stories that our brains build without us even being aware that they're doing it. And these stories are arguments for how things are related. Why, if this happens, that happens. This person did that because they're like this, right? If I do X, I'll get Y. These things happen all the time. There's a professor out of Harvard Business School, Howard Zalter, who says that 95% of decision-making is pre-conscious. We are not aware of these stories happening, and they're happening all the time. So, for instance, in IKEA, when you're walking through the endless maze that is IKEA, and the meatballs that you had have worn off long ago, and the kids are still stuck in the spit-encrusted ball pit, right? And you are still looking for that one thing that is going to magically turn your 695 square foot apartment, oh no, that's just me, into this magical place that they've somehow managed to build in the store, right? And then you see something, and there, at the end, and IKEA says, this will solve everything. And you say to yourself, I believe it. I want that. Right, you didn't walk in knowing that you wanted that, but you're like, that is going to solve my problem. But your brain is doing that. Do you remember yesterday how Phil Jones said that there's a little voice in your head that is doing this? It's that voice in your head. But here's the thing you need to understand. There are some of you who, not out loud, said, I don't know what he's talking about. Because there is up to 25% of the population that literally does not have a voice in their head. Now, for those of us who do have a voice in their heads, I have like 7. One of them's from Boston. Her name is Karen O'Sullivan. She loves the Red Sox. If you don't have that, if you have those voices in your head, you cannot imagine what it's like not to be like that. But these things, these stories, happen before that voice ever comes into play. Do you understand? Like, it's just what we feel like doing in the moment, but it's because of how our brains have connected. That if I want this, I need to do that. If I want this result, this will happen. If I do this, this other thing will be the result. So every decision has a story like this. Every action we take ends an argument in our head. And so we need to figure out how to build this, because every day, every moment, our brains are trying to fill in the blanks of this story. It's how we make sense of the world. We take the little pieces of information we get, and we start to try to create those relationships around it. It is how we get that understanding that we need for buy-in. Story is how we get the understanding that we need. So that's why if we're trying to get that buy-in for a change, internal, external, whatever it might be, we have to build a story, because it is the simplest, strongest way for someone to understand something. But stories aren't magic. Sorry to tell you this. Now, because there's a lot of storytelling advice out there, and you could follow it to a T, and it may not work. Has that ever happened? Where you have said, I followed everything that someone told me I should say that will get someone to do a thing, and then they don't do it? Well, that's because there's something else happening. Because when this happens, when someone says, even though you've got okay, I'm telling you a story that's going to get you from here to over there, they're like, nah, I don't believe it. That's not the way I do it. That's not the way we've always done it. It can also sound like, this has been working for me, why would I change now? Any of that sound familiar? So what we have to understand is, just as change, buy-in is built on story, stories are built on something. In order for someone to have enough confidence to cross, right, it has to rest on something. That would not be much of a bridge if it didn't actually have these foundational elements. So if change is built on story, what is story built on? Well, story, my friends, is built on beliefs. The things that we believe about how we shape and how we operate in the world. These beliefs are amazing, right? There's research that shows that there are 26 core, what are known primal world beliefs. Things like that you fundamentally believe that the world is good or bad, or that the world is safe or dangerous, or that it's beautiful and ugly. And how you see the world absolutely drives what you do in it. It shapes the stories that make sense. So the stories that make sense to us are only those that align with the beliefs that we already have. So you can tell someone else a story, but if it's based on beliefs that they don't have, they won't buy it. So we have to do something different. Now, this is critical, again, when we're thinking about these changes that you're trying to get put into place. And there's something that you've probably experienced over and over again, which you can feel like, this is hard. You're pushing this rock uphill, because in those cases where someone's saying, I don't like this, we don't do it that way, this is not the way we've always done it, why should I? The thing that you're pushing against are the beliefs that they already have. Now, I find that it's very useful when there's something scary to give it a name. I like to name things Frank, but in this case, it has an official name. So the scary thing that you're pushing against, these beliefs that you have, is something called cognitive inertia. See? Look, you're learning something this early in the day. It's exciting. Okay, I totally geek out on this stuff. If it were later in the day, we'd make it a drinking game. But make sure you're hydrating so you can drink water. So cognitive inertia, hydrate. Yes, okay. All right. Now what cognitive inertia is exactly what you've experienced, right? Where people hold on to the beliefs they already have and the stories they already tell themselves. So those stories like, we've already done it this way, or this only benefits you, the company, not me, an individual associate, right? We're pushing hard against that. So what do we try to do? We try to say, well, either that's not true or believe something else. We try to swap in new beliefs because these old beliefs are getting in the way. That seems to make sense, right? Except that the longer you believe something, the stronger the belief. Which means those new beliefs, the ones that you're trying to say, hey, just swap this in so that you'll believe my story, are the hardest to gain and the weakest to hold. Yet, there's hope. Because within everything old, there is something new. So for instance, music library, not new. Pocket-sized, not new. But put those things together, and those 1,000 songs in your pocket totally change everything. When you build a new story on the parts that people already want, already believe, then you are building a new story that they already believe, and that's what we're going to do. And when you do that, you're taking that cognitive inertia, that thing that you've been fighting against, and you're making it work in your favor. You're taking these old beliefs, you're remixing them, and you're putting them together in a new way so you can build a new foundation for lasting change. So you're probably wondering, okay, that's great, but how do we do that? Okay, so this is where we talk a little bit about story. And how do we put these simple, strong stories together based on these old beliefs? Well, point number one, and you heard a little bit about this from Phil Jones yesterday, and that is that all stories start with desire, with wanting something that we don't have. Now, this desire, this motivation, this curiosity is what is known as a drive state. Drink. All right. What that means is it's kind of like hunger, where once you experience it, you must satisfy it. If there's this gap between what you know and what you don't know, you must close it. It's kind of like, I'm hungry, I need to eat, we're just going to do that. I mean, I need to eat all the time. It's like snacks are my favorite. Okay. But when you're doing this kind of, this linking, right, this desire, we have to start with something. Again, if we're trying to build buy-in, we're trying to build something that people want, we have to anchor it in something they already want. Now, I know that sounds simple, but this is not what we typically do. We typically say, well, you should want this other thing, rather than linking it to something that they already want right now. But if they don't already want it right now, something that they do want right now is always going to win out, because that thing is older, longer, stronger. So the first big question when you're trying to do this for yourselves, and this is the first question that I work with my clients to answer, is this one. What audience question do you or this change exist to answer? What audience question does this change exist to answer? Now, it is a deceptively simple question, because the answer, when you're thinking about the iPod, like they weren't sitting there saying, what MP3 player should I get? That wasn't the question. Because people weren't thinking about buying MP3 players. There were actually already MP3 players on the market, small ones, that fit in your pocket. That was not it. What we're looking for here is something that solves a problem or elevates an opportunity that somebody already knows they have. They're Googling it. They're watching YouTube videos on it. They're trying to figure it out for themselves. Now, in a lot of ways, you can think of this as kind of the why behind what you do. It's why you're doing it. It's the reason why you as a company are doing this change or making this change, but it has to relate to what the audience wants. So instead of saying, back to the iPod example, hey, what's the best MP3 player? I would argue they were answering this kind of question. What's the best way to bring my music with me? Because 22 years ago, that's when the iPod came out. 22 years. There's probably people in this room that are like younger than the iPod. Is that true? Don't tell me if it is. I don't want to know. But if you think about what we had 22 years ago, it's going to be a little walk down memory lane for some of you folks. What did we have? We had a sun visor full of CDs in our car, right? We had Discmans, we had Walkmans. We had like CD rack towers, and we had like giant bookcases from IKEA full of albums which weren't going anywhere with us, right? So we had all of these things. So we were always looking for a way to take more of our music with us in a better way, because we could only do it kind of album by album at a time, right? Okay, so what audience question do you exist to answer? Now, first, shout out to Ashley Collins at USANA and Brett Cutler, who helped me to kind of make sure that I was accurate in all of this. So they worked with me we kind of reverse engineered this process on their launch and affiliate program last year. And we talked together about what audience question does that affiliate program answer for their current associates. And we came up with this. How can I make more money faster? Would you agree that that's something that your associates want? They already want? They're always looking for a better answer for that? Great. That's it. That's where you start. You start on something that you know your audience already wants, the most motivating version of that question they have. Okay, that starts the story, again, because all stories start with desire, and that's this, like where they are, that's the thing that's going to get them the motivation to cross that bridge, to cross that gap. Now we have to answer the question. All right, this is where you run over to the other end, and then you end it. Okay, how are we going to end this? Now, we could just say, how do I want to carry my music with me? An iPod. And for some people, that's enough, right? You know these die-hard Apple heads that will just like, I will buy the new Face computer because it's Apple. Some people are like, how do I carry my music? Apple says iPod, fine, I'll do it. But for other people, not so much, right? And you probably have folks on your team that are like that too, where you're like, hey, we need to do this. And they're like, sure, yep, sign me up. And then there's probably also people on your team who are like, hey, we need to do this. And they're like, oh, no. And that person can be your CEO, right? Not just somebody in the field. Somebody who just goes, oh, no. Now, what we're looking for here, and this may sound a little unusual, is what we're looking for something that's not just, yes, it's your answer. So in the case of Usana, yes, it's an affiliate program is going to be the answer here, but we're looking for something that I'm going to think of as load-bearing, or two parts. Right? The best way to show this to you is to think about how is it that the iPod launched? What was that famous line to answer this question? So again, what's the best way to bring my music with me? And what did he say? 1,000 songs in your pocket. Two things. It's like chocolate, peanut butter. 1,000 songs in your pocket. And my experience working with companies all across the world, actually, is that any idea can be broken down into these two component parts. And what we're looking for here is, again, something individually attractive and a complementary combination. So let's go back to our affiliate program, right? How can I make more money faster? And you can say, again, we say affiliate program, break it down into its two component parts. So what are we really talking about there? We're talking about adding affiliates to your current business model. Now, that, again, might be enough for some people that understand that, and they understand intuitively why that would be important. But you may want to go one level deeper. What does that actually mean? Well, it actually means adding new people with more aligned options into your current business model, right? So we're looking for that piece. So number one, what audience questions does it exist to answer? Number two, what's your answer broken into two load-bearing parts? Now, at this point, you're probably wondering, all right, we're looking for simple, strongest, stickiest, but why is it two, Tamsen? Well, Judy Holler reminded me of a great explanation for this the other day, and it's just that, love this one. Well, it's kind of like martinis. Well, one is not enough. Three is, wait, what is it? Three is too many, right? One is not enough, three is too many. And then my husband once a time said, and four is not enough, right? So, okay. So what you're looking for is two. Now let's take it outside of martinis. That may not be your jam, or that may be the wrong thing to remind you of this early in the morning, just saying. Because think of it this way, only one thing, that's not strong. Three things, we're not simple anymore. We're starting to complicate it. We're starting to add opportunities for people to object. We're adding complication to the argument. So we need to stick with two. Just like you stand on two legs, this change has got to stand on two load-bearing elements. So that gets us our understanding, but how do we get the agreement? Well, this goes back to what the story is built on. Remember I said that it's an argument for how cause and effect are related. So once you've got the beginning, what change do they want to make? What is the thing that they already want? And then on the other end, what change do you want them to make, broken in two parts? Now what we need to do to connect it is to build that argument for the existence of the change, where you're basically saying to them, why do you answer it that way? And in this case, what we're looking for now is not just the why behind what you do. We're looking for the core bedrock beliefs of your company that explain why you do it that particular way. So, for instance, now they didn't say it out loud with the iPod, but we made the connection ourselves. Remember I told you your brains would do this. We fill in the blanks of the story. So when they say 1,000 songs in the pocket, what is the belief that explains why that would make it the best thing? Well, because more songs is more better, right? Like, instead of just 6 albums, I can take my entire music library. And on the other side, in your pocket. Again, they didn't say this out loud, but we filled in the story. It said, well, the smaller it is, the more places I can go. So more is more, but less is more. And together, they create something that answers the question in a way that I can't unhear. 1,000 songs in my pocket. Now, the key here, these beliefs have to be something that not only come from why do you actually believe as a company this is the right change to make, but it has to be something your audience already agrees with. So if you're thinking about how can I make money faster, and we're talking about adding affiliates, Ashley and I talked and we said, you know what? We think the thing that everybody would already agree with is that new people mean new opportunities to make more money. If there's more people in your orbit, if there's more people in the system, there's more opportunities to make more money from them. It's a numbers game, right? And on the other side, the more options align to how different new people want to work means more alignment, which means more likely for those new people to stay and for you to capture some of those new people that you would not have previously been able to capture because those options weren't there. Do you see how this works? The story is an argument for how the cause and effect is related. So when you're trying to build this story, the simplest way to put it all together goes back to my boy, Aristotle. All right, hydrate, okay. Because here's how it works. It doesn't say, hey, you know what? You should do an affiliate program because. It actually starts them way back over here. It says, if you agree that new people means new opportunities to make money, and you also agree that more aligned options means more opportunities to make money as well, then that's why we wanted to put something in place that allowed you to do that, to add people and add the options that allow those people to make more money with you, for you, through you. That's going to be the affiliate program. Do you feel the difference? Because if somebody, and this is what Aristotle told us, if somebody agrees with the pieces of the argument, they're much more likely to agree with the argument overall. And that's how we get understanding and agreement together. So when I'm working with clients on this, what we're trying to do is basically say, how, again, do we get the simplest, strongest piece? And with those elements, you can do this. You can separate and state these things really simply. You can state the change as just, hey, to make more money faster, we need to add more people with more aligned opportunities. You make the argument based on the beliefs. Well, here's why. Because we believe at USANA that new people means new opportunities, and that more options means more alignment with those new people, which is why we want to add this affiliate program. So let's tell you a story about how that would work. So you see, we're not taking away classic stories, examples, et cetera. We are supplementing them. We're putting the strength behind them. And there's actually one other benefit to this, that they found through research that people who built things from IKEA, like actually built them, like the Billy bookcase, which, have you ever tried to construct something from IKEA with a life partner? It's like the best test of whether or not you're actually meant to be together. I'm convinced it is, right? But what they found was that people value things, as part of the secret of IKEA as well, because people value things that they have built themselves more than the things that they haven't. And so there was a psychologist who went further and says, I wonder if this applies to ideas and changes too. And it does. We believe more the ideas and the changes and the stories we have built ourselves based on the beliefs that we already have, on the wants that we already have, than anything that anybody will ever give us. So this is what it all comes down to. When we're trying to think about how do we build buy-in, whether it's for your business or for change as a whole, this is the one thing I know to my core, that the biggest leaps start from the surest ground. In order to build those stories of change that people must have in order to make the change, we have to build them on the bedrock of belief, on the beliefs that are unchanging for them, that are unchanging for you, and the places where those beliefs intersect. Which means this is not a branding exercise. This is not a positioning exercise. This is not something to turn over to your communications team. This is a deep-seated business strategy. It's a process of excavation of these beliefs, not of invention to satisfy somebody's short-term action. What I'm asking you to do is, instead of asking people to make a leap of faith, build a bridge of belief. Because when you do that, you are laying the foundations for lasting change, not just for them, but for you as a whole. And best news, no Allen wrench required. I'm Tamsen Webster. Thank you so much.